So I'm just thinking with a lot that both Malarika and Abhinita have shared. Again, brings me to question that why are we here to discuss Animal, right? Of course, we all know this isn't the first time that in Indian cinema we've seen a movie that at least some of us would have felt uncomfortable watching and some of us may have resisted watching, right? In the beginning, I think Malarika did a poll and there were many who actually have not watched the movie, right? What I'm also trying to think about is the discussions around the movie, right? It's very interesting, when I did watch Animal and honestly after resisting for a bit, because probably there was, I think over the years I have tried not to read too many reviews before watching the movie, because then, that does kind of hamper the experience for you. I'd heard so much, and because, there were some real-time requests that can you do a review for this, I just didn't want to watch it. And then I did. And what it felt like and why perhaps we are talking about this movie. And in saying that, I'm not exonerating all the misogyny that has happened in the past, right? लोगों ने movies बनाए हैं, उसमें स्टॉकिंग को नॉर्मलाइज करना, बहुत सारी चीजों को नॉर्मलाइज करना होता रहा है. अभी बहुत रिसेंटली एक कॉन्वर्सेशन मुझे याद आ रहा है वेयर किरण राव, a young director, had a critique for Animal, and the director of Animal responded to her critique by saying, you have a problem with this, go ask Amir Khan what he was doing in Dil. वहां पे एक सीक्वेंस है जिसमें मतलब रेप, it's a near rape that is then seen as either wooing a person or a legitimate way of taking revenge with somebody, right? Of course, आप किसी से सवाल कर रहे हैं और बैक में किसी और के रेफरेंस का सवाल आता है, वो अपने आप में अजीब है. बट अगर देखें भी तो बहुत सारे मूवीज हैं, और मैं ये नहीं कह रही हूँ कि डायरेक्टर्स बहुत इनोसेंट थे, उनको सच में लगता था ये प्यार है, उन सब में प्रॉब्लम रहा है. पर अभी जो हम देख रहे हैं ना, वेयर it's almost like a film made to provoke. It's a film that has already anticipated critique, right? It's a film where when the director puts it out, he's like, अब मेरे को पता है फेमिनिस्ट बोलेंगे, राइट? मुझे पता है तुमको ये इस पे चीजें आएंगी, फिर भी मैं बनाऊंगा. And in past, both of them have shared, we watched movies, and this is also learning that it's taken me time, having been part of certain movements, to realize that, ultimately directors, they've not signed up to be activists. They tell a story, and it necessarily, it doesn't have to be on social issue. They're not our political teachers. And is it possible then to enjoy a cinema where there is things you connect with, but you're able to find certain frames, certain moments, that whether or not you like the whole movie, but it does something to you. It has a certain creative connecting potential for you, right? With this, but even when it's a movie that has been critiqued for its politics, there are so many movies which are critiqued for their politics, that it becomes difficult to sometimes acknowledge that you may have liked something in them, right? So, आज के टाइम पे ये बोलना कि नहीं, एक टाइम पे मुझे ये अच्छा लगा था, अब रियलाइज होता है कि नहीं, इसमें प्रॉब्लम था, एक अपॉलॉजिया हम लोग फील करते हैं, राइट? लाइक यू सेड कि यहाँ पे अगर हम बोलेंगे कि इसको अच्छी लगी, तो शायद प्रेशर में बहुत लोग नहीं बोल पाएंगे कि अच्छी लगी. I also feel this movie was, when one tries to understand it, and I'm saying I'm trying to make sense of it as I'm speaking, as I'm thinking, that one task or one thing that this movie was also doing is come out of your apologia. कि अगर आपको एक मूवी अच्छा लगता है जिसमें इस तरीके का मैस्कुलिनिटी है, इस तरीके का ये है, तो मैं अपॉलोजेटिक नहीं हूं बनाने के लिए. आपको भी apologetic feel नहीं करना होगा इसको देख के enjoy करने के लिए. So I'm also thinking of why do I feel that a different culture is, there is something different happening here. Because again, for the nth time, this is not the first movie that we've seen with this kind of masculinity or misogyny or sexism. And for those of us who watch this movie, right, there are several moments, where you feel that the director is constantly anticipating the critiques and saying, कर लो जो करना है, बोल दो जो बोलना है, मैं इसको इसी तरीके से दिखाऊंगा और एक्सप्लिसिट करके दिखाऊंगा ताकि आपको भी क्रिटिक करने में बहुत फिगर आउट ना करना पड़े. I'll spell it out for you so that your task becomes easy when you're going to critique it, right? And I'm also trying to think of, why this? Why in this way? What does it tell us about our times, right? So then, जैसे एक larger एक लार्जर कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इंटेलेक्चुअल गाली हो गया है, राइट? बहुत सारे मूवीज आते हैं पिछले कुछ टाइम में, बहुत सारे ऐसे मूवीज आए हैं जिनका फैक्ट से कोई नाता नहीं था, बट दे क्लेम्ड टू बी अबाउट फैक्ट्स, राइट? सो फ्रॉम 30,000 यू रिड्यूस द नंबर टू 3 and still you say, but it's not about the numbers, we're still making sense, right? I'm talking about the Kerala story here, right? 30,000 से 3 का नंबर पे आ जाने पे आपको लगता है कि उस मूवी का जो पूरा पॉइंट है वो बदल नहीं जाता है. And there is a deep, what can I say, to hell with the fact kind of a thing. We will say what we have to. And in certain ways, this movie also seems to be part of that culture, we'll say it as it is. We will make nuanced conversations difficult to have. It's so easy कि इस पे जो critique आएगा वो woke feminist critique है. तो फिर आप बात कैसे करोगे जब आप इतना anticipate करके कुछ बनाते हो, and the kind of conversations that have been having, that you see, I wasn't surprised actually. Karan Johar recently, tweeted about how he's found this to be the best movie of the year. Right? And there were people who asked him, but your Rocky and Rani seemed to be saying quite the opposite. So how do you reconcile the two? That you make a movie like Rocky and Rani, which I felt, could also be uncomfortable for its extremely teaching kind of unnuanced take on some aspects of gender politics. But here you seem to be, you seem to have a filmmaker who's like, ठीक है, मैंने पास्ट में बहुत कुछ ऐसा बनाया है जिसके जेंडर पॉलिटिक्स में बहुत क्रिटिक हुआ है, तो अब मैं कुछ ऐसा बना के I'll say, I understand my gender, I understand my politics. So it comes out with something, which probably will have a lesson in every line. And then to say that, I think this was the best movie of the year. And I watched it twice. And I understand it. How different, and I'm just wondering, he's not, I'm not quoting Karan Johar because of deep respect or something, but what, the kind of culture that he's needed, this movie has made it difficult for people to critique it. Because, वो बहुत क्लियर डाइकोटमी हो गया है कि कुछ लोग हैं जो मूवीज को समझते हैं, देन देयर आर द इंटेलेक्चुअल्स, देन देयर आर दीज फेमिनिस्ट्स who don't want to engage, right? So I'm also thinking of how do we recover the language to have conversations around movies, it's where we can leave certain terminologies aside. Where is it possible then for us to leave certain terminologies of sexism, misogyny, toxicity, and then see what is happening, right? Because, misogyny of it apart, I feel bad for the male protagonist of the movie. He doesn't get to live his life. He doesn't get to enjoy his life. It's just violence and, there is so much of anger that as a human he can barely realize any of the dreams or things that he would want to do. I would find it oppressive to be him in the movie. In so many ways, he seems to be the most oppressed and stunted character in the movie, right? So how do we, how do we find the language to be able to think more of what is happening in the movie? Even the kind of backstory. As a psychologist, one often struggles to articulate this, that yes, our histories are important, and they are very important. They shape our making, right? A lot of how we are, what I am, can be made sense of when you engage with, what has been my journey so far. And at the same time, any therapist would tell you that the idea and the whole purpose of being able to find a backstory is to help you actually recover your agentic self, where because you begin to understand why you're this way, you're able to make more informed choices. जब तक मुझे नहीं पता है कि मैं गुस्सा क्यों हूँ, मुझे नहीं समझ में आएगा मैं उसका क्या करूँ, मैं उसको कैसे कंट्रोल करूँ, वो क्यों किस पे निकल रहा है. I can't do anything about my anger or something, which is causing a disruption for me. If I don't understand why is it there in the first place, right? So one part of trying to understand what led to it also helps you make sense of it. Okay, I know this is not coming from here, it's coming from there. So now can I own responsibility around it? Can I own accountability for what I do? Because now I know where is it coming from. So then where do I direct it now that I know where it is coming from, right? So the whole purpose is then not to justify or find a legitimacy for your present based on what happened in the past. The whole idea is so that you're able to understand your present and then become more informed and accountable and responsible for what you do. Right? So this idea in the movie that yes, our past can explain and justify our present, which we see happening, not just with this character, but with so much else that we see around, Our past was this, that has made us this way. And then it's almost as if it works in an extremely deterministic fashion. Right? So how do we talk about this also, which the movie seems to be doing, The number of references, actually, I don't know whether that's just... I don't think he would be sarcastic about it, but a lot of references to Atmanirbhar Bharat, a lot of, the slogans that we hear about the progress of the country, and how closely some of those slogans come to ally with his kind of a toxic masculinity is also something that, would be useful to think about, So for me, I think, it's while talking about this movie, right? I don't expect, toxic masculinity, sexism and all of that has been there, and I don't think it will magically end. And sometimes, yes, it does reflect, if not what is happening, then at least what we wish, right? But what seems to be happening with this movie is that one doesn't have to be apologetic about thinking this way, or, that you anticipate and you make reference to the critique that would come in such a way in your movie that it actually becomes difficult to talk about. When I was asked to think of writing a review and I was seeing what was happening, it felt like it would be just another voice will be like, हाँ बोली, एक और feminist बोली. How do I engage? I don't want to talk only to the converted. So how do we then begin to talk when and that seemed to me a bit dangerous. That with all other movies, Ranjana comes, and I remember I was a student of this campus when Ranjana came, and many of us felt differently about the politics, the gender politics of the movie, and of course the representation of the campus and so on. And one could write about it, and those writings could initiate a dialogue. Right? So somebody would feel, no, but you're taking it too far, it's only a representation of what happens. Even with Kabir Singh, that was possible. Where a conversation was possible that, I've talked to people who said, we like it, we don't like this character, but we've seen this happen. We connect, and it's not unusual to see that we've seen it around in our circles that we've had female friends who don't find this kind of a control problematic, but at the end of the day, they do understand it as love language of some people. You know, they do feel nice that there is this one masculine person who gives that kind of an attention. You know, who takes care and whose protective zeal goes to that length. So, and there was a possibility to have that conversation. I think with Kabir Singh, what troubles me is that they've taken away that platform to have conversations. You know, where it's more like bring it on. You know, and while watching this movie, you know, like when I was watching it with a friend, and when this movie ended, and he said, "Okay, so what do you feel?" You know, and it wasn't like one hadn't anticipated. तब तक इतना reviewer इतना कुछ पढ़ लिया था कि पता था कि movie में क्या होगा. And actually, when the movie ended, you know, I thought it brought a frame to my mind. You know, it was something like, you know, as a young person, sometimes when you're harassed, you're stopped, or, you know, something of that sort happens, and you retaliate, or you answer back. And it's a very uncomfortable moment when you answer back, you respond, and it appears that your aggressor is actually getting stimulated by that response. You know, they think that response is part of that tension. You know, you've seen those movies, some scenes in the movies where an aggressor is harassing a woman, and when she turns back to slap him, and he'll put the cheek in front. You know, that, okay, that will be some form of, you know, is bahane, I'll get to touch, there'll be a contact, right? I don't know why, but it felt that way. That, you know, my speaking about it, my feeling angered by it, will be taken that way. Bolo. You know, that is what really troubles me about this particular movie. That, and which, like I said, you know, is seem to be happening where कहीं कोई कुछ बोल रहा है, आप उसमें कुछ लॉजिक, कुछ रीजन, कुछ फैक्ट के बारे में बात करने की कोशिश करोगे और आपको खान मार्केट, एलीट, इंटेलेक्चुअल, सूडो इंटेलेक्चुअल, मतलब लॉजिक पे बात करना is something that can be laughed at, right? That if you try to talk logic, you try to argue something with a rationale, with some evidences, ये सब intellectuals, you know, ये सब intellectual conversation है. As if, you know, this is not everyday, this is intellectual. As if intellectual, intellect, intelligence, rationality, logic is something which is only metaphysical. It has nothing to do with concrete, it has nothing to do with everyday. That separation is kind of scary. That, you know, we can't have those conversations. You're writing a critique where the world is absolutely divided, so I know my critique will only get likes or forwards by those who already agree with that critique and could have written a similar critique. Right? So, you know, the references that Nabanita you made about how men are talking in this movie, you know, वो ऐसे लग रहा था कि अच्छा इससे परेशानी हम ये भी बोल सकते हैं, ये भी बोल सकते हैं, वो बोलने में दिक्कत नहीं है. It's sometimes nice to see कि इतना जो हम self-censoring taboos में रहते हैं, बोलो, you know, body है, you know, sexual process है, जो भी है, खुल के बात कर पाए is one thing, right? But you see, you know, and it's almost like, and you know, we are critiquing the politics, or you know, we are critiquing, or we are thinking about animal. Another extremely problematic cringe movie that perhaps didn't merit much reviews because it really didn't do well. I mean, then how do you look at it? You know, a kind of feminism that seems to be. I mean, I'm actually worried about filmmakers nowadays who try to actually make movies with feministic themes because they absolutely distort it. You know, I mean, the case, thank you for coming. I don't know how many of you have seen. But to understand, you know, that it makes it so, you know, it shouldn't make it difficult for me to own the movement. I mean, I will not disown the movement ever. but what it does to the projection of what feminism means. So it's not just, Sandeep Reddy Vanga who's doing this to feminism. A lot of what is being doled out in the name of, we have feminist characters, is also, provoking certain kind of responses and a very distorted idea of what feminist women look like, or how they talk, or, almost sometimes you see it's an alpha female or a female with little regard for consent or emotions of others who gets projected as, so this is what feminism looks like, right? Which also should disturb us. Because unfortunately for many in the public, what feminism is will not come from the readings that we all do. It would come from what is projected and sold to them as this is feminism. Thank you for coming. It was extremely disturbing to see a point in the movie where suddenly it's, smash patriarchy. Whereas there is no single idea of what patriarchy is in the entire movie. Right? Where just, yes, sexual freedom, desire of women is important, but to equate expression of the desire with smashing patriarchy, and as if patriarchy will get smashed, and in very problematic ways, right? So all I'm saying, like I said, I don't have very well-formed, how do you critiquing sexism and misogyny of this movie? There are so many like that. But this is where I feel, I do feel that it becomes important to talk, and I also feel that it's important for me to think of how do I then talk so that the talk can be received, that it can become a conversation and doesn't become a part of that already neat divide, Okay, these are those who can unapologize, so it's also something that you can bear on. I'm not going to apologize for liking it. Don't. But that you will assert it that way, right? So then what does it do to any possibility of somebody being able to say something about it, right? How do we recover that space where we can talk about movies, where the directors and the movie makers can engage? And another very interesting thing is that how the families of those in the movie have responded to the movie. So there is this YouTuber who does beauty blogging and some lifestyle blogging. And she struggled in life, and now, her YouTube blog is a source of constant, income for her. And her husband has been struggling to find a space in the film industry. And he actually gets a break of sort in this movie. So he plays one of the several cousins of Ranbir Kapoor in the movie. He doesn't have, I don't know whether he has a dialogue or not, I didn't hear one. But of course there is a tremendous screen presence because these brothers are always around. And so there was this vlog, where she was so excited that finally he's got work, and though it's not a great role, but it's a lot of screen time, and he gets to work with Anil Kapoor and Ranbir Kapoor and all. So, and she accompanied him to the movie's first screening and all of that, and extremely excited about it, right? She wasn't even sure whether the invite would be extended to the partners of those who are not playing very central characters in the movie. So it was a great moment for her. And then they watched the movie screening and she comes back, right? And when she's talking about the movie, it was very interesting to see that, here was a moment which these two people have really, lived a lot of years to be able to witness. And now when she's seen that movie, she's seen that, her husband has got an incredible screen time in the movie. She struggled to say something nice about the movie. And she didn't want to discredit the movie because it means a lot to him, But she was struggling to say that she really liked it, right? So she didn't critique the movie. हाँ, अच्छा था. मतलब उसके लिए वो honestly उसको उस तरीके से बोल पाना इतना मुश्किल लग रहा था, and that for me said a lot. Because I'm sure any other movie, And when she would have come back, it would have been like, it's spectacular, I'm so proud of it, and I hope people watch it, and I hope. She wasn't able to say anything of that sort. Right? And that's what I'm saying, with Bobby Deol's family, there are many in the fraternity close to these people who said, but I wasn't very uncomfortable. The difficult thing is how difficult it is becoming for them to say they were uncomfortable watching. That it's okay, everybody will not be comfortable, but why should it become difficult to admit it? So that I will say I loved it, I can say, without feeling responsible, without any sense of reflection. But if I have to say that I found it difficult, then I have to bear, trolling is just one part of it. But that is coming with a lot more judgments. So suddenly the judgments have shifted. If you say, I loved Pyar Ka Panchnama, you knew at that stage, aapko judgment aayega. There were moments in that movie that I actually laughed. And I would be worried to say that, I did laugh at some moments in those movies because I thought I would be judged. To come to this point where I know that other than this select audience, largely if I were to speak about this movie and share my discomfort, that is where the judgment and the trolling would come from. Not even judgment, it would be like, it would be like talking to the walls. I think that is where, that is something that I at this stage, I can problematize that. So yeah, I'll stop here for now. And
hello. Shukriya.